Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is TJ Murphy, and welcome to another episode of Adventurous Entrepreneurs. My guest today is Stan Gibson, a visionary who has gracefully transitioned from nearly 4 decades of corporate leadership into a role that truly resonates with his soul. Having stepped away from the corporate arena 3 years ago, Stan has since dedicated his life to guiding leaders on their journey of self-discovery and growth. Stan's personal life is as enriching as his professional one. He has been blissfully married to his wonderful wife for over 40 years, a love story that began as early as third grade. His journey has taken him through the ranks of senior executive positions at two Fortune 500 companies and on the path of entrepreneurship. Stan's approach is highly customized and strategic, ensuring that individuals and organizations achieve the results they desire. He's not just a coach, he's also an accomplished author with his book, Living a Rich and Intentional Life, providing invaluable insights into living an intentional and fulfilling life. Beyond leadership and organizational dynamics, Stan is an avid researcher in neuro and psychological science. He brings a wealth of knowledge on how leaders can create abundant energy through sleep, nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, productivity, routines, and healthy relationships. Just a few of the golden takeaways Stan shares in this episode are lessons learned on the gridiron that will help you succeed in all areas of life. How to find balance, build trust, and lead with intention, the power of people-centric leadership, and how to live an amazing life built around your priorities. So, without further ado, this is me and Stan Gibson. Welcome to the Adventurous Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, TJ Murphy. Since quitting my corporate 9-to-5 and starting a business while backpacking through Asia back in early 2017, I've had the privilege of learning from some incredibly adventurous entrepreneurs. Through these conversations and my own journey, I've learned that much like in life, entrepreneurship is an adventure. On this podcast, I explore the journeys of top-performing leaders in their fields. These wide-ranging conversations include tactical business advice, how I built this insights, lessons in leadership, life hacks, travel stories, favorite hobbies, and insights into living a purposeful and joy-filled life. Adventures await us, so let's dive in. Hey, Stan, welcome to Adventurous Entrepreneurs.
Thanks, TJ. I'm excited.
Me too. I enjoyed our little preemptive conversation before this, so I know we're going to get into a lot of good stuff here. And I'd love to start with a bit of background on the journey, because you have a very unique story, transitioning from a corporate executive to an author and a success coach. That's a big shift. So what's one thing that you've learned about yourself in this journey that completely surprised you?
Oh boy, TJ. If you're going to limit me to one thing, you're really putting the pressure on. I'll tell you.
Tell me as many as you want.
No, I'll tell you what. I've been doing what I'm doing now for about 3 or 4 years, and when I say doing what I'm doing, my new company, I just changed the name of it from Oxygen Plus to StanGibsonSpeaks.com. And the reason I did that is because, speakers speak. I was told that probably a few months ago, and it just made sense that, as I roll out, I'm a keynote speaker, I'm an executive coach, I'm a consultant for companies. And when I say I started doing this 2 to 3 years ago, I actually started doing this around 10 to 15 years ago. And I always tell my clients, have a plan B. You never know when you're going to need it. And I can go into a story eventually if you want to, but basically, it became very apparent to me 10 to 15 years ago. This was my calling. Even though I worked in a corporate environment, I worked for a Fortune 150. I was an executive there, and it just became apparent to me, now's the time. Now's the time to go ahead. I actually started coaching individuals before and after work. I started doing keynote inspirational speeches across the country. I started getting asked to do more and more and more. And so I had already had kind of this plan B in place. I wrote a book called Living a Rich and Intentional Life. And all of a sudden, 2 to 3 years ago, as life was changing, and for the company I was with, they were basically downsizing about a third. And they looked at me and said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "You're never ready, but why not?" And so I already had plan B. It was February 25th of 2021. And at 8 o'clock the next morning on February 26th, I was rocking and rolling. I was ready to go. And so, I didn't even take a pause. So if there's any lesson you're looking for, I guess I always tell my clients, just, have a plan B, just have it on the shelf. Just be doing something that fits what energizes you. You never know when you're going to need it. And life will deal you surprises at times, and just be ready. So that's a little bit of my long-winded to a very short question you asked me, TJ.
No, there's such brilliance in that, because so many people ask me, and I even had this conversation on the podcast before about like, when is the right time to start my business, or to take this leap into entrepreneurship. And it's so good to have that plan B in place, and to be working on your passion project while you have the stability of an income, a W-2 job, whatever you're paying the bills with. Sometimes when the ships get burned and you got to dive all in, you got to go for it if you don't already have something in place. But if you can work on it and have it ready to go, and then when the time comes and you've got the stability to jump all in, that's going to give you so much more momentum and so much more peace of mind, less anxiety when you're diving into the world of having your own business. So
Absolutely.
love
Absolutely.
the
Well
way that
said.
you went
Well
about it.
said.
Well, we talked about your football experience, and you had a very unique experience back in your football days, going from a struggling football team to national champions. And I'm curious, how did that transformation parallel the journey that you've seen in the corporate world, or in your own personal development, or in your story?
One unique experience I had, because I was recruited out of high school as a tight end, and I was looking at different universities, and there was a university by the name of Eastern Illinois University. And I was really excited because, when I was recruited there, I could see the talent was there. They just had a guy that just got drafted in like the third round for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I could just see this talent that was, it's like, hey, what a great place to go to and develop my talent. So I get there and I get into my freshman year, and, lo and behold, they lose their first game. Then all of a sudden they're second, and they lose every game, TJ, up until the last game of the year. They go 1-10, and you don't keep your job when you go 1-10. And so we got a new coaching change, and a guy by the name of Daryl Mudra, and his nickname was Dr. Victory, comes in. And I can still remember we all get into the weight room, which could hold us. And he kind of comes walking in, and he looked like this absent-minded professor, and, disheveled a little bit. And he tells us right off the bat, I know very little about football. In fact, he said, the most success I've ever had was I coached my grandson in Pop Warner, and we won the city championship. And all of us are sitting here saying, dude, we just went 1-10, and you know nothing about football. And in fact, he coached the games from the press box, because he said he could see better from up there, but he didn't coach on game day. But I'll just get to the punchline. We went from that 1-10 that very next year, that very year he came in, we won the national championship. And what he did with just 3 or 4 principles have stuck with me to this very day as it relates to the business world. And what he did was he came in and he was authentic. He told us who he was and who he wasn't, but yet he surrounded us with the right coaches. In fact, one of the assistant, the offensive coordinator, had just played at Eastern Illinois a few years ago by the name of Mike Shanahan. Well, Mike's won what? 3 Super Bowl rings, or he's got 3 Super Bowl rings. His son, who wasn't even born at the time, is the head football coach of the San Francisco 49ers. He hired 9 to 10 other coaches with the same amount of talent. He had that eye for just bringing in people that could motivate us and give us systems and give us structure. That was number 1. Number 2, he told us very upfront, he said, you know what? Well, I'm going to surround you with the best coaches. You, each and every one of you, are the real coaches, because you see, you're out there on the field. You know if you're getting beat or if you're beating the guy across from you. And only then can we make game decisions. And you think about companies today, DJ, how many executives or leadership teams actually pull information from those out in the field?
Very few.
Very few. And it was so brilliant. And this was like, several decades ago. And this guy's got us out there thinking while we're on the field, how do we pull this information? How do they go ahead and audible? Maybe they need to start running up the 3-hold, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, he made us all coaches. And then he did something else that was kind of unique. The year that we were 1-10, just the year before, our uniforms made Penn State look sexy. I mean, we had white pants, we had these black shoes, we had these blue helmets that had just an E on the side of it. and these big, thick blue jerseys with a number on it. I mean, you talk about, everybody, especially the brothers. I mean, we were all looking at each other like, this ain't going to work. And he said,
Yeah.
what can I do to help morale?
Yeah.
And,
Gotta
a
have
couple guys,
swagger when we're out on the field.
and you got to remember the era I grew up in. People said, could we get white shoes? And it was like, I can't believe I just said that. Well, I'll tell you what, within 2 weeks, boxes showed up. We had silver pants with a blue stripe down. We had mesh jerseys with Panthers, because that was their nickname, Panthers across it. And those guys that had six-pack abs could, have midriffs that showed their six-pack abs. We had silver. We looked like the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. I mean, we looked awesome. And lo and behold, we had white shoes. Guys could run faster. They could jump higher, everything. Anyway, the whole thing was just a culture shift. It was a culture shift of transferring the leadership to the players. And that's a lot what I talk about when I go in and work with companies today. We talk about how do we become a people-centric culture? How do we teach the leaders to become people-centric? I have a saying, TJ, that when leaders learn to coach, employees learn to lead. And it's directly from that experience. So the better we get at coaching versus just espousing all this knowledge we have, but when we bring others up, everything elevates. So that was a little bit of my story, and I'll finish it with this. I did not play my junior and senior year. I figured out that I wasn't going to be playing on Sundays, let alone much playing time on Saturdays, and I became an assistant head coach at a high school that had the same reputation. I don't think they'd won a game in 2 or 3 years, and in fact, I showed up as defensive coordinator the very first week, and we played a team that was one of the top 10 in the state, and we lost 89-6. And I don't know if I was more surprised that they scored 89 or the fact that we actually scored 6. Both were a surprise to me. But we utilized a lot of the same concepts. I mean, from uniforms to empowering each individual. And the good thing in high school is sometimes juniors become seniors, and they had a year to develop. And we faced that same team basically a year ahead. And yeah, we lost 6-0. But you can see the transformation when you start to shift more of that leadership into the players, into the employees, into the organization. And it's just magic. It's just magic, TJ. So anyway, it's a little bit, and I will say this too about Eastern Illinois. If you haven't heard of them, you've probably heard of a few. Tony Romo came just a few years later. Sean Payton, he quarterbacked there a few years later. I can keep going down the list. Brad Childress, head coach for the Minnesota Vikings at one time. We can keep going down. There is just a
incubator of talent.
It became Football U, all because of that legacy that Coach Mudra created. So that's a little bit of my football story. And again, I use a lot of those concepts today, and there's still just as much magic today as they were then.
What an incredible story. And what you described, the magic is in the people. And you've been married for over 40 years. Am I correct?
Coming up on 42, my friend.
Oh man. So that's an achievement in itself. And from, my perspective, I've been with my wife for, we're high school sweethearts. So since high school, I'm now 30 years old. We've been married now for 5 years. So I always like to pick people's brains when they've been married for as long as you have. So how has your relationship with your wife influenced your approach to leadership and coaching, specifically what you do?
TJ, I've really never had anybody ask me that question. That's a great question, because kind of like you, we met in 3rd grade.
Wow.
So, I always say she was chasing me around in the playground. She cornered me, said, we're going to get married. But no, it wasn't like that. We kind of, it wasn't a thing until we really started dating around the end of my senior year. But I will tell you, there were 2 things that I really, even as young as I was at the time, that I wanted. I always thought I wanted a spouse that I could just trust, because trust is a big thing for me. It's a big thing for me personally, professionally. Your brand trust is very, very important. And I wanted, to marry somebody that I thought would be a good mother to our children. And I couldn't have scored any higher on the charts with my wife. And, we're like anybody else. And you say you've been married, would you say 9?
5 years married.
5 years.
Together for
together
over
for
15
9
years. Yeah.
We all go through seasons of life. And, the first 5 to 10 years is going to be a season where you're still getting to know each other. And, Then there's another season where you start to have kids and all of a sudden things start to get a lot more stressful because your time gets divided. And there are seasons of life that you go through. And my wife and I couldn't love the season of life we're in right now anymore. Our daughter just had twins, actually, grandsons, just turned 2 years old. And so the only thing I'm telling you is don't get discouraged with any season of life because it's just the segue to a better season of life right around the corner. And every bit, we just love each other more and more. My wife, and things do kind of come full circle. I talk a lot to people about taking care of themselves and doubling down and being very selfish. And the reason I say selfish, TJ, is because I tell a lot of people that I work with, clients, teams, be very selfish so that you can, or be a little bit selfish so that you can be very selfless. And what I mean by that is taking care of you. And the reason that I bring that up when you talk about my wife is because 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And as we got the diagnosis, obviously all the emotions, you're crying, you don't know what to expect. And, everything starts to crumble. Again, not only have we been married for 40 years, I mean, we've known each other a good 10 to 12 years before that. And so one thing I realized, and it had to come to fruition, is I need to take care of me. Because if I don't take care of me, first thing in the morning, I mean, I start getting up earlier, 5 o'clock, working out, praying, meditating. I want to be the best version of me because the day ahead is about taking care of the important people in your life. And it became about, her survival, which, she is stable at this point. This is 5 years later. We've been in and out of treatments and things like that. But when I say every season of life brings on something different, while we wish she didn't have the diagnosis, we also know that it just makes life that much more special. I had a friend one time, TJ. This was about 10 or 12 years ago, and it's actually what drove me into coaching. He had cancer, and he said he had a 50-50 chance of living. And when he said that, I didn't know what to say. And he looked at me, TJ, and he said, look, when death becomes certain, life becomes rich. When death becomes certain, life becomes rich. And I said right there, why do we wait to get sick? Why do we wait for a certain point in life before we get that sentence? Before we decide to have a rich and intentional life. So while things have changed a little bit for my wife and I, we're still living a rich and intentional life. And I wish I would have had someone like me be able to coach me when I was in my 30s and my 40s. I would have done things differently. But every season of life you learn and your love actually gets greater. So I'm very excited for you, TJ, and your wife. You're going to find these things out someday. And what I'm saying now is even going to resonate more down the road.
Well, it resonates with me now. I mean, enjoying and making the most of the season that you're in, no matter what life throws at you, and taking care of yourself first is crucial. You got to be able to show up in those moments for the people that count on you, and to be able to have that energy and that health and everything that you need within. That's so crucial to it. So I appreciate you sharing that. And
Thank you.
you mentioned trust as a big piece that you were looking for in your relationship with your wife. Can you share a specific instance where trust and authenticity played like a crucial role in turning a challenging situation around, either in sports or in business, both in the corporate world or with the clients that you work with?
No, I'd love to. I'd love to. And in fact, I will tell you, I think trust is going to be one of the most valuable commodities going forward with artificial intelligence, with everything that we have today. We don't know what to believe. We don't know what, we hear something, we see something. Everything's, trust is going to be just one of those commodities that if you can come across very authentic, it's going to be a very securely gold standard type traded commodity that you can deliver as an individual going forward. One of the things, and it so happened with my wife, but I do it with the companies that I work with and the clients that I work with. The first thing we do is we get a pretty huge dose of self-awareness. And what I mean by that is, trust is probably one of the things that is missing the most in most organizations today. It just is. You can look at all the statistics and all the everything. Trust is something that employees and people are looking for. So one of the things that we do is I firmly believe, TJ, that when you go through some assessments, and what I do is I take people through something called the Genius Spark, and that's a derivative of Strength Finders, but we kind of turn it upside down, and we really find out who people are at their best. I mean, we create a paragraph of who TJ is. I mean, it's almost unfair, because when you see that paragraph, it's like you're the Michael Phelps of that swim lane. I mean, you could win any contest by, 5/1000ths of a second, because you're that good. And when we start to find out who you are at your best, and we realize that those very strengths that make you so great when you're under stress can also become kryptonite, then we start to have an awareness. And the reason this is important is because when we do this, number one, individuals start to find out when they're at their best and what their kryptonite is. But when you're in a team setting, you also get to say, you know what? Now we're getting real. We're starting to find out who TJ and Stan really are. We're finding out who they are at their best. We're finding out their kryptonite. We're finding out nothing is malicious. It's just basically how we're wired. And so the reason you kind of asked me this about my wife is because we were married, and again, happily married for, coming up on 42 years, but it wasn't until 2 years ago that I had her take this assessment.
Mhm.
And I found out that, her number one, they call her Saint Sharon, because she is everybody's favorite person, everybody. And so to me, when I found out that one of her signature strengths was that of a developer, it means that she just wakes up loving to help people. Now, in a marriage relationships, when they want to help you, it doesn't come across as helping. It comes across with another word. And nagging, we can use a lot of different words. But I used for years, it was like, I don't want to be helped. And so the thing that was making her so wonderful to so many people, from a marriage perspective, I had to change my narrative. And I had to say, oh, she's helping me. This is who she is at her best. This is her signature and her core strength. Stan, accept it, because the worst thing you can do to somebody who's a developer is resist their narrative or their help to you. So things like that all of a sudden helped us to start to trust. One of my signature strengths is an activator. I love to get things going. It served me well in the corporate world. Grass didn't grow underneath me. I mean, I kept things moving. But on the other hand, that very strength can become kryptonite, because I had people wanting to analyze all the various alternatives. And I was already at the end. I'm saying, hey, we're already finished. And so with my wife, it was the same thing. As an activator, I like to be on the move. I like to go out. Sometimes she says, Stan, can we slow the activator down? Can we sit in tonight? So having that understanding, whether it be in a professional setting or in a personal setting with your significant other, with your loved one, with your spouse, there's something beautiful about that I wish I would have known 20, 30, 40 years ago, TJ. But at least knowing it now is pretty special.
This is lighting a fire under me. I mean, my wife and I have done some of these types of exercises in the past, whether it's like love languages or
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs or anything like that, but it's a good thing to come back to. And this particular lens, I'm very intrigued by. So gonna have to get some more info from you and try that out.
I would love to take you and your wife through this. It's magic, and it's something that is just again. And who doesn't want to see a paragraph of who they are at their best? I mean, a friend of mine by the name of Rex Miller, he's worked with many industrial psychologists, and I've kind of helped him. In fact, he just had a book come out this month, and I'm fortunate to be, one of the people that promoted the book, from within inside the cover. But this is a tremendous program that, again, I've used with, in fact, I'll just give you an example. I used it with a CEO and a COO, and they are really tight, but they have a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension between them. And when we went through the exercise from a joint perspective, joint coaching, come to find out, they just needed to change their narrative, because while the CEO is very critical and very numbers oriented, and he's always going to look at the what if or the risk side of the equation, The COO was more, live and let live. Let's just do, let's try. The more we do, let's fail forward quickly. And so there was this tension between the two. And once we were able to understand it through this process, I was able to help the COO realize, thank goodness the CEO is risk adverse. Because if they just did everything that they wanted to do, they would be hurting their margins. They might even be bankrupt. And so just getting people to change their narratives is very important from a team perspective. And that's just one example, I think, of where this stuff has great value. And I'd love to take you and your wife through it. I think you'd find the same thing at some point.
I appreciate that. And we'll definitely want to take you up on that offer. So we've talked a little bit about people-centric leadership, and you coach people through this process. What are some tangible steps that leaders can take to make that paradigm shift toward a more people-centric approach? And what impact have you seen it have with the clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, another good question, TJ. A lot of people, when I start working with them, uh, they want to get right into coaching. Help me be a better leader. And we often find out, because I've done all the research on neuroscience and on, health, well-being, anything you want to call it, on how to help leaders have more energy. And the reason I bring that up is because that typically becomes the foundation of starting to work with clients before we even get into how we're going to tweak mission statements, vision statements, how we're going to tweak, systems within the company. We start with the people. And I can tell you, I've got a number of clients that, they want to get right into it. And all of a sudden we've had to say, I'm not healthy. And I have a pretty strong belief that if you're not doing well at work, you're probably transferring a lot of that to home. And if you're not doing well at home, you're transferring that to work. So we've got to get you on a healthy slate. And a lot of that comes with, the science around sleep. It comes with the science around, movement or exercise, around nutrition. It comes from, hydrating. And I'm a big believer in morning routines and in evening routines. Tomorrow starts tonight. And we have to do certain things. I mean, some of the morning routines that I even just basic that I start a lot of clients on is a 10-3-2-1, no caffeine 10 hours before going to bed. It stays and regulates in our system. We have got to be ready to go to bed at whatever time you want to. And caffeine is just one of those things that I can't live without in the morning, but there comes a point in time where it has to stop 3 hours before bed. In fact, I was just talking to a guy this morning. We talked about, drinking, having a big heavy meal and having some wine. That wine, I've had to actually taper that down, and he actually quit altogether, because as much as I love it, the sugars actually stay in your system 3 hours before you go to bed, actually 5 to 6 hours. And so you might think you fell asleep or you're calming your nerves. You're actually having a very restless sleep. And in 2 hours before, we start to get, the LED lights, cavemen back in, when nighttime came, automatically their brain shut down. It was time to sleep. We don't have that ability today. We're still watching TV. We're on our phones. We've got lights on. So starting to dim, kind of the world around us, a couple hours before, and then even an hour before, starting to read, starting to really shut down the technology fully. But that's a 10-3-2-1. There are many different things that I talk to people about when it comes to morning routines. It goes much more extensive than that. And then evening routines. Evening routines are very important. So there's a neuroscience around clients that I use to get healthy up front, and even their exercise. When do they exercise? Morning is always best. And I have a bias towards that, because there's a neurological factor of basically it releases serotonin, and it releases dopamine, and it releases cortisol, which is fear, is the highest in the morning that it'll be all day for us. So exercise actually reduces cortisol. And so we can start the day off probably at our best. So there's a lot of things that I work on with clients from a physical perspective before we get into the emotional aspects. And the emotional aspects, then, I think, to answer your question, once we go through a lot of the self-awareness, I have a lot of executives that come back and say, I think I'm probably in an imposter syndrome. I just don't. I need to lead better. And then we get into a lot of the science around, I love imposter syndrome, by the way. If you don't have imposter syndrome, it means you're not trying hard enough. Because if you've reached the pinnacle, of being secure, then you're not pushing yourself. So I'll try to get people to not be uncomfortable with feeling imposter. It's a drive that makes us better. So I work with clients and on the foundation of being healthier, but then we get to the point of working on the company and working on their leadership skills.
I'm glad you bring up the well-being side, especially sleep. This has been a big focus of mine over the last, I'd say pretty much the last year, listening to, the likes of Andrew Huberman and Dr. Matthew Walker, two people that are great
Absolutely.
for any sort of expertise. These are two people to go read up on. But you mentioned like, drinking even one glass of wine 2 hours, 3 hours before bed. I use a Garmin to track my sleep, and it's big, the amount that it affects your sleep, even just a little bit. And caffeine, same thing. I used to drink coffee all day, but now it's a cup in the morning and absolutely nothing past noon, because it does have just such a detrimental impact on my sleep, which then leads into the next day. And it takes more than just one good night's sleep to make up for one bad night's sleep. So that impact isn't worth even, maybe on occasion, but when during the work week especially, it's not worth it. So I'm glad that you bring that to people's attention, because it is critical to show up as a leader when you're.
Yeah. And you mentioned you use the Garmin. I actually we probably both had the same one, but I've also used for those of you out there that are listening that you like wearables and you want to really monitor things, the Garmin is very good. Whoop, WHOOP. Most NBA athletes wear the Whoop. I've tried that and it's a very good device. There's the Aura Ring. There's a lot of different, even I'll tell you what, Apple Watch has come a long way
Yeah.
in
My
monitoring sleep patterns. And you want to make sure that you're getting the right 4 stages of sleep each night. And sleep is absolutely, it's the foundation. When I talk about nutrition, I talk about exercise, and I also talk about hydration, because hydration, your body's made up of over 80% fluids, and especially your brain. And when you're not getting enough fluids, your brain starts to shut down. And so, there are certain aspects. Just think about showing up with energy in the morning and having that same energy throughout the day. And a lot of it starts with sleep, as you said. So, blackout curtains, I can give you 10. In fact, if you like, I have what I call a double down sheet. And it's got all the neuro and physiological aspects of sleep, nutrition, of all the things that I'm talking about. And it's got all of the tricks of the trade that I call them as far as getting them. I've got a double down sheet. And if you go to my website, which is stangibsonspeaks.com, and you go to resources, it's right there. So please, by all means, go ahead and take it. Put it up on your refrigerator, whatever you want. But it's got all the sciences just condensed into basically 2 pages on a PDF that I think you'll enjoy. And it's just a good reminder.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. And everyone listening, if you're looking to optimize your life, sleep is by far the biggest impact you're going to get, the most bang for your buck. And it's little things that you can shift in your day-to-day lifestyle that are going to have a huge impact and allow you to just have more energy, which will lead to more happiness. It'll lead to more productivity, which will ultimately lead to more growth. So, Stan, a big theme of this podcast is really living an intentional life, and how do you blend especially business with doing the things that you love most with the people that are most important to you. So I always like to ask what that looks like for everyone that I have on my podcast, and I'm curious, what does living that intentional life look like for you in this season that you're in terms of your schedule and how you prioritize time and really optimize for the things that you love to do.
Well, you hit it right on the head when you said the season of life that I'm in, because, I couldn't probably do today what I was doing in my 20s and my 30s, et cetera. So each season of life, and I do work with a lot of Gen Zs, because I feel like, I can probably, in a look back mirror, I can help them, get through that season of life just as much as my season today. But I do think you have to look for what your ideal week looks like, because, when I had, we only had one daughter, but, I still traveled a lot. I think the biggest badge of honor that I wear, TJ, is that I don't think I really ever missed an event. I coached her on the soccer field, coached her on the basketball court, made every track meet. I made as much as I could. And I think I was probably about 98%. And to me, that's one of the, with all the travel and everything else. That was pretty miraculous. And that's probably one of the things that I hold most dear to my heart. But again, that was a season of life where I had to make a lot of sacrifices and I had to look at what's important. In fact, I tell a lot of clients when we work through, I say, tell me what's important in your life. And they will, in fact, I want 5 or 6 things. Give them to me specifically. And they'll give them to me. And then I'll say, okay, let's take those 5 or 6 things. Where are you putting the most time? And then I say, let's even take the word time out. Let's just say energy. Because I will tell you, the people say, oh, family's number 1. And work will be number 3 or 4. Well, where do you think work is? Work's getting 80% of their energy. And I realize that we're talking about certain seasons of life, but I will tell you, TJ, I'll tell you mine. Mine is my faith is first and foremost, and it's non-negotiable. And when people say that I've been married for close to 42 years, they said, well, your wife's number 2. I said, no, it's not. I said, I'm number 2. Because again, go back to the concept. If I don't take care of me, I can't take care of her who's number 3. My daughter, son-in-law, and my grandsons are right after that. My work is after that, and my friends and everything else follow down. But then I have to reshift my energy. I can't put 40, 50, 60 hours into my faith or into my wife or into those things, but energy. Can I not send my wife a text during the day saying, I love you? Can I not do certain things that are energy related? That say, you know what, I can show my wife just how special she is, even though she's number 3 on the list. And even myself at number 2. It's just that hour and a half in the morning of working out, of my faith-based reading and taking care of me for an hour to hour and a half. That right there fuels me for the other 22 hours out of the day. So when we talk about this, you've got to be very clear on your priorities in life. Of there are times when I've been asked to do something from a business perspective, but when business falls below family, I've got to stop and think, am I really honoring my wife or my daughter or whatever by going to that event or doing something? And so I've got to prioritize things to keep a balance. And my family knows, me being, in my past as an executive, now in the business I have, there are certain things that I have to do from a professional perspective, but I can't do it at their peril either. I've got to somehow show them the energy that they deserve.
I love the distinction between time and energy. And it is the little things sometimes where you can go out of your way and send that text or, call up a friend where maybe you can't give them all the time because you do have other priorities, but you can still give that energy and make sure that you have your priorities in line. So thank you for sharing that, Stan. And as someone who's constantly evolving, what's next for you? Any upcoming projects or personal goals you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, in fact, I did a post the other day on LinkedIn, and I told people, I said, I'm not big into New Year's resolutions, but I said, I want all of you to start to close your eyes, and I want you to start to think of you directing a movie, and you're the star in this movie, and you get to not only direct it, write it, but you're the lead actor, actress. And I want you to just, kind of visualize this. And as I went through this, I said, I'm hoping that one word pops out at you. And it's that one word that's going to drive the script of the movie. And I started getting a lot of responses. And for me, that word is fearless. And it's, what does fearless mean to me? Well, I want to start getting out of my comfort zone a little bit too for this year. I've got just met with my marketing team this morning. We're going to start doing some group coaching or mastermind coaching starting in about 2 to 3 months. Starting to look at some subscription coaching, and obviously I'm on a lot of podcasts, and, how do I just changed the name of my company to stangibsonspeaks.com because I come alive on stage. It's crazy how I transform, but, doing a lot more keynote speaking, doing a lot more virtual speaking, to groups over the phone. Speaking is a big thing for me because when I speak, we can have the conversation you and I are having right now, TJ. And to me, it's all about transformation and growth. That's what gets me up in the morning, not mine, yours. And so when I'm doing that and when I'm speaking, again, speakers speak. When I'm speaking, I know that, we're transforming and we're seeing changes in people. And that's, again, that's what gets me up in the morning. So being fearless about that, taking chances that I would not have taken probably 2 to 3 years ago, not caring about what what people are thinking, having very little concern about how it crosses other people, because I'm going to be probably 20 or 30% of the people that run across me are going to say, "Hey, I like that guy. I cannot be so focused on the other 60 or 70%." But that's a little bit of me. So fearless is that word for me this year. And I would challenge all of your listeners to take that same exercise. What's that word look like for you?
Hmm. Fearless. I love the conviction and energy behind it. And from our conversation, I'd love to see you up on stage and see that other side, that energy that comes out. I'm sure it's electric. So as we wrap up here, Stan, I have a choose your own adventure question for you. So you can pick which one you'd like to answer, or both if you so desire. But the first one is, what's a recent place you visited, say in the past 5 years? Or number two, just a recent adventure you went on. In either case, could be a trip with friends, family, solo, business, something that stands out to you. But in either case, what was it like? What made it so memorable? Maybe a lesson you learned, a favorite meal or drink. Give us a little story.
Oh boy. Probably the having friends that are true friends. I mean, people that when you're with them, your cheeks hurt because you're laughing so hard. It's like, you know, you've got belly rolls coming out. And we've got those friends. And we've got two sets of friends, and we went to Europe with them when we did Italy. And it the Italy experience was like epic. I mean, it was epic on epic, but the meals, the just sitting down with friends, the laughter. I mean, fortunately, we videoed a lot of it just on our phones because we still pull them
Awesome.
out. And it lights up the dopamine, the serotonin, all the things start kicking off. And it was such a special trip. And, I always say, spend money on experiences, not stuff.
Yeah.
And, that has been kind of my wife and I's mantra is how do we spend more money on experiences, not stuff? And that's one that just comes to my mind. And my wife and I are planning a few, next year, health provided and, doing the, Camino, this, over
Oh,
in France,
yeah, that's
doing
on
the
my list.
walk. That is just, if you don't know what that is for your listeners, it's a 500-mile walk that, you can also do it in segments, but you're either running from something or towards something, they say. And it's just such a religious experience of taking this walk and, this Camino that St. Francis took, over 2,000 years ago. So, that's one that I've got coming up. And possibly I've got a friend who puts together golf packages over in the British Isle. And so I'm always about doing some fun stuff because that's what life's all about, my friend.
Life is meant for exploring. That's my wife and I's mantra, and we definitely prescribe to experiences over stuff. And how can we optimize for maximizing the experiences, especially
Good
with
for you.
friends and my parents and her parents as much as we can while they're still around. So, love hearing it. Where can people connect with you, Stan? What's the best way to get in touch with you, to follow your stuff, social media, all that kind of stuff?
So, hey, go on to stangibsonspeaks.com. That's the first place. And I would love, because I do have a newsletter that comes out once every Thursday. And I don't know much about marketing, but I know that my marketing people tell me it's got a 50% open rate, which they say is like
Great.
uncanny. So whatever I'm doing, I guess it's doing it right. But
Resonating.
love to have you, go to my website, stangibsonspeaks.com, and, just you can subscribe and then eventually unsubscribe if it's not your jam. But I tell you what, that's the best place. And then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. And those are really kind of my main social media outlets right now. I'm probably going to expand that in the future. But right now, that's where I'm comfortable. And I love creating content and doing motivational speaking and again, helping people transform and go through growth.
Well, we will put links to everything in the show notes for everyone listening, so it's easy for them to connect with you. And Stan, I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. I've got a lot of energy right now, and I just love the way you talk and the people focus, especially. It's all about people in this world. So keep on leading and helping to foster this change that we're going to need in this next generation.
Thank you, TJ. God bless you. I appreciate it.
To all of our adventurous listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Please be sure to subscribe, download, and share this on social media or with someone you know will get some value from it. Leaving a review goes a long way in helping people find the show, and I personally appreciate reading them when they come in. So please go drop one if you have the time. We'll see you all next week, and remember, whether we're talking about business or the things that bring us joy outside of work, life is meant for exploring. So go out there and live it one adventure at a time.